Another day guarding the pristine halls of the Galactic Union's diplomatic sector, another day watching these ridiculous humans bumble about like lost cubs. At least the view from Security Station Delta 7 gives me something to laugh at during these mind-numbing 12-hour shifts. There goes one now, tottering along on those absurdly straight legs. How do they even balance? No digitigrade stride, no proper claws, not even decent fur to protect them from environmental hazards. Gust pink, fragile skin wrapped in artificial coverings that they call clothes. The amount of fabric they wear is almost offensive, as if trying to compensate for their evolutionary inadequacies. "Hey, Grurnak!" Sergeant Carvax rumbles from his monitoring station, his dark brown fur rippling with amusement. "Look at this one. Think it can even lift its own diplomatic case?" I swivel my ears toward the entrance scanner and bare my teeth in what humans would probably mistake for a smile. The human in question is particularly small, even by their diminutive standards. Its upper limbs look like twigs compared to my own muscled arms, and it's struggling to hoist a standard-issue diplomatic carrier onto the security scanner belt. 10 credits says it asks for help. I growl back, already reaching for my credit chip. But the human surprises us both by taking a deep breath and managing to lift the case. Its face turns an alarming shade of red, probably some sign of physical distress. But it succeeds in placing the carrier on the belt. I grunt in disappointment as Carvax's triumphant laugh fills our security bubble. "Pay up, Scout," he says, extending a massive paw. As I transfer the credits, I can't help but wonder aloud, how did these creatures ever make it to space? I've seen maintenance drones with more impressive physical capabilities. Heard they relied heavily on automation, replies Carvax, his claws clicking against his console as he checks the scanner readings. Probably let their machines do all the real work while they focused on whatever it is they're good at. Making entertainment broadcasts, maybe? A small group of humans passes our station now, chattering in their high-pitched voices about something called coffee and their upcoming presentation to the Parliamentary Advisory Committee. The very idea makes my fur bristle. The Parliament is actually considering these beings for full membership status. It's an insult to every real warrior race in the Union. I remember my first day on this assignment, fresh from the Outer Rim patrol routes. My commanding officer had pulled me aside and delivered what I thought was a joke briefing. The humans are a protected species now. Treat them with the same respect you'd show any other diplomatic delegation. I'd laughed, thinking it was some sort of initiation prank. It wasn't. Now, 6 lunar cycles later, I'm still trying to understand what the Parliament sees in them. McKechnie, how urgently does the President state that the accommodations will be considered for the exhale? Sure, they managed to achieve faster-than-light travel, but so have plenty of other species. At least the Zentari have their crystalline exoskeletons, or the Volux their natural bioelectric fields. But humans? They're walking proof that evolution can have a sense of humor. "Incoming priority delegation," my console chimes, interrupting my thoughts. Level 2 security scan required. I straighten up, professional training taking over as I watch another human group approach. This one looks marginally more important, judging by their more elaborate clothing. They are escorting what appears to be some kind of robotic assistant. Typical, probably can't even carry their own data tablets without mechanical help. As I initiate the deep scan protocols, I catch fragments of their conversation. Impressive progress in the strength augmentation trials. Neural interface compatibility exceeding expectations. Military applications could be. They fall silent as they notice my ears swiveling in their direction. Smart enough to practice basic security awareness, at least. I'll give them that much. Still, whatever strength augmentation they're working on, I doubt it could help them survive a single round in our military's basic training program. The scanner completes its cycle, and I wave them through with the standard security clearance gesture. As they pass, one of them makes eye contact with me and does that weird facial movement they call a smile. I respond with a proper Osarian greeting snarl, taking satisfaction in how quickly they hurry past. "You're terrible," Carvax chuckles, but I can hear the approval in his voice. "Just doing my job," I reply, settling back into my observation post. Someone has to maintain proper standards around here, even if the Parliament's gone soft enough to entertain membership applications from hairless primates. Little did I know then how wrong I was about these humans. But that's a story for another shift change. The diplomatic sector's recreation center is one of the few places where different species can interact without the stuffiness of official protocols. It's also where I learned my first real lesson about humans. It happened during my rest cycle, 3 days after that delegation with their mysterious strength augmentation project passed through my security station. I was maintaining my combat readiness with our standard exercise routines, necessary when you're stationed at a diplomatic post instead of a proper military facility. The recreation center was relatively empty that cycle, just a few Zentari practicing their crystalline meditation in the corner, and a single human using one of the cardiovascular training devices. I'd seen this particular human before. They worked in the diplomatic archives, always carrying stacks of data tablets with those twiggy arms. What caught my attention was their persistence. They'd been running on that machine for at least an hour, maintaining a steady pace that seemed unlikely for their species. A thin sheen of liquid covered their skin, some kind of cooling mechanism I'd learn later, but they showed no signs of stopping. "Impressive endurance for a human," I rumbled loudly enough for them to hear, my tone making it clear this wasn't actually a compliment. But real combat requires more than just running in place. The humans slowed their machine, turning to face me with that unsettling facial expression they use. "Oh, is that an invitation to spar?" Several of my fellow guards, who had just arrived for their own training sessions, perked their ears up with interest. I couldn't back down now, not that I wanted to. This was a perfect opportunity to demonstrate why humans had no business in the Galactic Union. "If you think you're up for it," I said, moving toward the combat mat, "we can use standard diplomatic sparring rules. First pin or submission wins." The human nodded, taking a moment to drink water and towel off their strange, sweaty skin. "Sounds good. I'm Tom, by the way, from the archives." "Have you decided to settle for this crap?" "Combat Scout Gruneck," I replied, assuming a standard ready stance. My fellow guards gathered around the mat, their muzzles already pulled back in anticipation of the entertainment to come. I outweighed this Tom by at least 150 kilos, and that was before considering my natural advantages in bone density, muscle mass, and combat training. What happened next still confuses me when I think about it too hard. I opened with a standard intimidation rush, expecting the human to either freeze or retreat. Instead, they stepped forward, their movement fluid like water. My momentum carried me past them somehow, and before I could properly register what was happening, the floor was rushing up to meet my face. I recovered quickly. I'm not a complete rookie, but every attack I launched seemed to work against me. When I tried to grapple, the human would shift their weight in ways that sent me stumbling. Instead of letting myself be grappled, when I attempted to use my superior reach, they would duck inside my guard and deliver surprisingly sharp strikes to pressure points I didn't even know I had. The end came embarrassingly fast. I still don't quite understand how I ended up flat on my back, one arm trapped in some kind of joint lock that felt like it was about to dislocate my shoulder. The human Tom had barely broken a sweat. "Do you yield?" they asked, maintaining the hold with disturbing precision. My fur was bristling with humiliation, but I wasn't about to risk a diplomatic incident. "I yield," I growled. They released me immediately, and even offered a hand to help me up. I ignored it, rising on my own as my fellow guards tried to hide their reactions. Some were failing miserably. "That was fun," Tom said, as if we just shared some light entertainment. "It's been ages since I got to practice my judo." Most species around here prefer striking arts. What kind of combat style was that? I demanded, trying to salvage some dignity through professional curiosity. Oh, just basic judo. It's one of our older martial arts, developed before we had any significant technological advancement, all about using an opponent's strength against them. I also mix in a bit of Brazilian jiu-jitsu for the groundwork. They said this casually, as if it wasn't completely insane that their species had developed multiple forms of combat arts before even reaching space. How many of these martial arts do humans have? Tom's face scrunched up in thought. Honestly, thousands. Pretty much every region on Earth developed their own fighting styles throughout history. That's not even counting modern mixed martial arts or military combat systems. I stared at them, my perception of humans shifting uncomfortably. Thousands? But your species is physically weaker. Yeah, that's kind of why we developed so many different approaches. When you can't rely on raw strength, you get creative. They smiled again, but this time I noticed something predatory in it. Want me to show you how that throw worked? I'd love to say I declined, that I maintained my dignity and walked away, but my curiosity got the better of me. For the next hour, this archive worker, who I'd previously dismissed as harmless, demonstrated various ways to turn an opponent's strength against them. With each demonstration, my understanding of humans and their potential threat level underwent a dramatic revision. I went to bed that night with bruised ribs, a wounded pride, and a lot to think about. But my real revelations about humanity were still to come. After my humbling experience in the recreation center, I started paying closer attention to the humans during my security shifts. Not just watching them, actually observing them. What I discovered was both fascinating and disturbing. Take their exercise routines, for instance. I'd previously mocked their constant physical training as compensation for their natural weaknesses. But now, I noticed the methodology behind it. They'd spend hours doing these slow, controlled movements they called yoga, which seemed pointless until I saw how it improved their already unnervingly flexible bodies. The complete section of wall they were working with was 128 feet. Their high-intensity training sessions would leave them drenched in that cooling sweat, yet they'd recover with unsettling speed and do it all again the next day. But it was a conversation with Tom from the archives that really opened my eyes. They'd started dropping by my security station occasionally, usually with some interesting tidbit about human martial arts or military history. One particular discussion changed everything. "So you run for entertainment?" I asked, still struggling with this concept. "Sure. Marathons, ultramarathons, triathlons. Lots of humans enjoy endurance sports," Tom replied while signing in for their shift. Actually, persistence hunting was one of our earliest hunting methods. Before we had tools, we just chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. I felt my fur bristle. "You ran your prey to death?" "Yep." Humans have superior heat regulation and endurance compared to most mammals. We can sweat to cool down and keep moving, while other animals have to stop and rest. Not to mention that warmer temperatures dry faster and move farther than colder water, leaving the body without the physical cognitive resources needed to move. Pretty much just ran after animals until they overheated or got too tired to keep going. That's when it hit me. Humans weren't prey that had somehow stumbled into sentience. They were persistence predators. Everything about their physiology suddenly made horrible sense. The efficient cooling system, the upright stance for better breathing and distance vision, those long legs built for covering ground, even their lack of fur was an adaptation for better heat regulation during long chases. The revelations kept coming. Remember that delegation discussing strength augmentation trials? Turns out humans had been mechanically enhancing their bodies since before they achieved spaceflight. Their weak muscles weren't a limitation, they were a blank slate for improvement. I started noticing other things too, like how they never seemed to fully rest. Other species would hibernate or at least take proper rest cycles. But humans? They'd work full shifts, exercise for hours, then spend their relaxation time doing complex mental tasks or more physical activities. Their socializing often centered around sports or competitions. Even their young cubs, children, were constantly in motion, playing at combat or chasing each other for fun. Then there was their pain tolerance. I witnessed a human diplomatic aide trip and break one of their brittle finger bones. They just wrapped it in a temporary splint and continued their work shift. When I asked about it, they shrugged and said they'd get it looked at later. These beings could just ignore severe injuries and keep functioning? The final piece clicked when I was reviewing some historical data about Earth's military conflicts. Humans didn't just develop thousands of martial arts, they'd spent most of their pre-space flight history fighting each other. Every disadvantage they had, they'd found ways to overcome through technology, technique, or sheer bloody-minded determination. Their current peaceful demeanor wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a choice, made by predators confident enough in their capabilities that they didn't need to prove anything. Now, when my squad mates joke about the humans, I stay quiet. Let them underestimate these persistent predators with their countless combat arts, their terrifying endurance, and their casual relationship with physical enhancement. Let them laugh at beings who turn the very concept of exhaustion into a recreational activity. I know better now. Humans aren't a joke. They're what happens when evolution builds a species that refuses to acknowledge its own limitations. Parliament didn't admit them because they were weak. They admitted them because anything capable of turning that many disadvantages into strengths is either a valuable ally or a terrifying enemy. As for me, I've signed up for what they call beginners judo classes. Tom says I'm making good progress, though I suspect they're just being polite. But that's another thing about humans. They're surprisingly good teachers for a species that evolved to run things to death. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it a lot. If you did, please be sure to give it a like. Feel free to comment and share this story too. It helps the channel grow. Let's make this channel huge together.